Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. North Carolina is losing teachers faster than it can replace them. As a result, a state committee is tinkering with how it evaluates and compensates teachers. It's an effort that supporters think could attract more teachers, but also keep existing teachers from leaving. But it's not without controversy. WRAL education insider Emily Walkenhorst is here to tell us all about it. Hi, Emily.
Hey, Jack.
So tell us about this plan and what this committee hopes to accomplish.
So at a basic level, this plan basically raises the starting pay for a fully licensed teacher to about $56,000. You might enter a couple steps below, but it would still be, an increase from the starting pay today. And so what it would do is it would raise the pay, and it would also provide more teacher leadership positions that would be used for supporting especially early career teachers. But another big thing it would do is it would tie your ability to be a teacher to you being able to prove you have been effective for 3 out of the last 5 years. So once you had that full license, you would need to prove that to be able to obtain that. And then you would also need to prove that to be able to keep it every 5 years. So those are the big things.
What qualifications does someone need to have to become a teacher in the state?
So currently, typically you are going to have a bachelor's degree in education, and you are going to get a license in your subject area. If that's going to be math, elementary education, things like that. You can enter the teaching profession without a bachelor's degree in education. You would get what they call today a residency license. Essentially, that's a temporary license that would require you to affiliate with some kind of educator preparation program. So that could be a college. You would say, I'm going to get a master's degree in education. And then you would be able to become a teacher so long as you met some of those requirements that today's teachers are, like if you had a bachelor's degree in education, what you would need to do to obtain that full license. And so that's the reality today. And so under this new proposal, you could still have lots of teachers who don't have a bachelor's degree in education, and they would be put in a specific pathway to become a teacher, and ultimately everybody would have to meet the same qualifications to become a fully licensed teacher, which is proving that you've been effective for 3 out of the last 5 years.
So it sounds like in the end, they're all going to have to be just as effective as one another. But is the state essentially lowering the barriers to entry through this plan?
So you already don't need a bachelor's degree in education to become a teacher. What this basically does is it says, we don't really care what your bachelor's degree is in. We just need you by a certain period to have proven that you're effective 3 out of the last 5 years.
Why is the state looking to change this now?
So North Carolina has for many years struggled with an imbalance in recruitment and retention. So you've had several thousand people leaving the profession every year, basically quitting teaching in the state of North Carolina. But the state of North Carolina only produces so many people out of educator preparation programs, and it's typically not enough to make up for all of the people leaving. So you can hire from out of state, but that gap is also widening every year. We're seeing significantly more people quitting than being produced here in the state because the number produced in the state is just lower and lower every year. And so basically, the state's in a situation where they need to find a way to get more people in the teaching profession and also keep them there. So the idea behind the plan is more people will want to be a teacher if they can make more money. And if we also have more teacher leaders who can, provide guidance and feedback, especially to early career teachers, maybe some of those early career teachers who are the most likely to quit among teachers might feel more prepared and thus might stick around.
So why has it been so hard to keep teachers, and also why aren't people entering the profession?
People have a variety of answers to this question. It depends on a person as far as what stresses them out the most, but the things that you often hear from existing teachers about what is stressing them out, it's a lot of concerns about pay, But it's also a lot of concerns about paperwork. It's concerns about, having to comply with all of these different new rules coming in and what kind of paperwork that creates. It's feeling a lot of pressure from administration and other outside forces to have high test scores. It's, I've heard people say that they feel like relationships between teachers and administrators are perhaps declining in some schools. And, it's student behavior maybe is worse now than it used to be. And it's just kind of a piling on of things that are stressful. And then you also factor in perhaps, other things that have happened at a state level. There's been a decline in the amount of money the state spends on professional development. Teachers are required to have professional development to maintain their licenses. And so now the state doesn't cover as much of that anymore. They can't get extra pay for having a master's degree, and many teachers have master's degree. A very large percentage have master's degrees. And certain benefits have been removed. Teachers no longer get longevity pay. All state employees get longevity pay for having worked for the state for a certain amount of time. Teachers are the only ones who do not. They used to, but they don't anymore. And so there are a lot of teachers who just feel like perhaps the profession isn't as respected as it once was. And then on the entry level, when you hear a lot of negative things, perhaps you might have an impression of the teaching profession that you're not going to make much money. Maybe you're going to decide that's really not the career for you. Statistically, teachers don't make as much money as other people who have bachelor's degrees. The cost of college is rising. And, a lot of people might just be deciding it's not for them. There's also been a little bit of research that has shown people have maybe an exaggerated idea of how little teachers make, but teachers do, we know, make less than the typical bachelor's degree holder.
We'll be back after the break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with WRAL Education Insider Emily Walkenhorst. We'll talk about how teachers are currently measured and why some teachers aren't crazy about the plan. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm talking with WRAL Education Insider Emily Walkenhorst about a state proposal to change teacher licensing. Emily, how are schools measuring teacher effectiveness now?
So right now, they're using a combination of factors. It might be principal observations or this model, which is referred to as value-added modeling.
What's that?
Value-added modeling is basically a measurement of how well an algorithm predicted a student would do on a test and how well the student actually did on that test. And it tries to find the difference, and then it averages them for teachers. And essentially, through a series of calculations, what value-added modeling is trying to show is, did a teacher have a good impact on their students? Did they have a neutral impact, or did they have a negative impact on their students?
And what comes of those evaluations?
Right now, it doesn't have an impact on your licensure. I'm not aware that, lots of teachers are being terminated for how they're evaluated currently. But that, So teachers are not being terminated for how they're being evaluated currently. And there is a little bit of concern in this new plan that they might be.
And that's led to some consternation among teachers, right? They're not exactly behind this plan.
Right. I think they've always had a lot of questions about what the value-added modeling is really showing. And this proposal, basically to prove effectiveness, would use either the value-added modeling for teachers whose students actually take the standardized tests, which is about 40% of teachers, or it would provide one of two additional options. It would be a series of observations, including by a teacher leader, students, a principal, and then there would be another option of some kind of growth review. And those last two haven't really been fleshed out. They have kind of maybe an idea of who they want to do observations, but they haven't picked a specific rubric of observation or a specific survey they want students to take. And so those 60% of teachers who would have to use one of those two models because their students don't take standardized tests they have a lot of questions about what those will actually look like, and they're fairly nervous about it. Basically, this effectiveness measure would be one of those three different ways: the value-added, observations, or some kind of growth review. And those would not be combined for a single measure of effectiveness. You would have to pick one of those three.
In your recent article about this, you heard some real-life stories from teachers about this value-add model. What did you hear from them?
So a lot of teachers said they don't completely understand the model. What happens is your students take the tests in the spring and you receive some kind of a score, some kind of report in around October, telling you basically, did this algorithm find that you were effective or had a neutral impact on your students? And a lot of them just don't really understand the score. They'll get a number. It's a 1, a 6, a -1. And they don't necessarily understand why. That report does not tell them, you failed to teach students X, Y, or Z standards, or you need to fix this or that about how you approach a certain topic. What it really just gives you is a number. And a lot of them just don't understand why their numbers are what they are. They might get a very nice number one year where they thought it was an average year, and they might have another year where they thought they were really proud of their students or the work they did, and the number's not as high. So a lot of them just kind of have questions about whether this algorithm is fair. A lot of experts at the national level will say the model is probably fairly accurate when used at scale, and it can have a little bit more volatility when it's used at the classroom level. And, but at the classroom level, when teachers are thinking this is a number that's now my label of what kind of impact I actually had, can be very stressful to some teachers. I talked to one who said there was so much emphasis at one of the high schools he worked at in Wake County that that actually partly influenced his decision to take a job at another high school where he felt the students were doing just as well, but maybe where they weren't nearly as worried about this number.
So what's next for this plan?
So there will be a committee meeting on Thursday. It's a subcommittee of the State Board of Education, and they are essentially deciding whether to recommend this draft plan as it is to the State Board of Education, which would then pass it along as a recommendation to the General Assembly. And they'd like to move fairly quickly on this. The State Board of Education, various members have already said they support it, and they really want to move it along. The General Assembly meets early next year for the start of their next long session, and they want this plan before them at that time. So there's a lot that would still need to play out just in terms of getting it to the General Assembly and actually getting it passed and signed into law. And then there would need to be a lot of planning after that just to figure out exactly what some of these reviews would look like for teachers. And there's also, of course, always a possibility the General Assembly will make some kind of major change and say, we don't want $56,000 as a starting salary for a fully licensed teacher. Maybe they change that quite a bit. There's a cost associated with raising these salaries, and this committee has tried to find some kind of happy medium. And so it'll come down to essentially, what lawmakers think, what it actually gets to them.
Well, I'm sure you'll keep us posted as it progresses. Emily, thank you. That's WRAL's education insider, Emily Walkenhorst. If you'd like to read our in-depth article about North Carolina's plan for teacher licenses, visit the education section of WRAL.com. Thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email that's waiting for you in your inbox every morning with Triangle news, events, and headlines to get you ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.